The following is a presentation of the Babylonian myth of Atrahasis, which includes the creation of man and the story of the Great Flood. The old Babylonian Atrahasis story was found on clay tablets which date to around 1700 BCE, and the standard Babylonian version came from around 500 BCE. The story of a great flood destroying most of humanity is a common myth throughout the world, and there are several versions from the ancient Near East which are quite similar to each other, including the story of the flood in the book of Genesis. The flood story in Genesis, as we know it, appears to be an amalgamation of two versions, one from the J source, which was written between approximately 922 and 722 BCE, and the P source from around 700 to 500 BCE. In Genesis, the wise man rescued from the flood was named Noah, but in Babylon his name was Atrahasis. In the Sumerian version of the flood story, he was called Ziusudra, and in the Epic of Gilgamesh, he was named Utnapishtim. This presentation is an adaptation of Dr. Stephanie Daly's translation in her book, Myths from Mesopotamia. I have removed some repetitions and passages with severely broken lines of the text. Daly's translation is a combination of the Old Babylonian version and the Standard Babylonian version. Some of the characters' names had changed between the two versions. For example, the god of the Apsu was called Enki in the Old Babylonian version and Ea in the Standard Babylonian version. For clarity, I have given the characters consistent naming throughout. I hope you enjoy this performance of Atrahasis. When the gods instead of man did the work, bore the loads, the gods' load was too great, the work too hard, the trouble too much. The great Anunnaki made the Igigi carry the workload sevenfold. Anu, their father, was king, their counselor warrior Ellil, their chamberlain was Ninurta, their canal controller Ennugi. They took the box of lots, cast the lots, the gods made the division. Anu went up to the sky, and Ellil took the earth for his people. The bolt which bars the sea was assigned to far-sighted Ea. When Anu had gone up to the sky, and the gods of the Apsu had gone below, the Anunnaki of the sky made the Igigi bear the workload. The gods had to dig out canals, had to clear channels, the lifelines of the land. The gods dug out the Tigris River, and then dug out the Euphrates. They were counting the years of loads. For 3,600 years, they bore the excess. Hard work, night and day, they groaned and blamed each other, grumbled over the masses of excavated soil. Let us confront the chamberlain, and get him to relieve us of our hard work. Come, let us carry the Lord, the counselor of gods, the warrior, from his dwelling. Come, let us carry Ellil, the counselor of the gods, the warrior, from his dwelling. Now cry battle, let us mix fight with battle. The gods listened to his speech, set fire to their tools, put aside their spades for fire, their loads for the fire god, they flared up. When they reached the gate of the warrior Ellil's dwelling, it was night, the middle watch. The house was surrounded. The god had not realized. It was night, the middle watch. Ekur was surrounded. Ellil had not realized. Yet Kalkal was attentive, and had it closed, he held the lock and watched the gate. Kalkal roused Nusku. They listened to the noise of the Igigi. Then Nusku roused his master, and made him get out of bed. My lord, your house is surrounded. A rabble is running around your door. Ellil had weapons brought to his dwelling. Ellil made his voice heard, and spoke to the vizier Nusku. Nusku, bar your door, take up your weapons and stand in front of me. Nusku barred his door, took up his weapons, and stood in front of Ellil. Nusku made his voice heard, and spoke to the warrior Ellil. O Ellil, your face is sallow as tamarisk. Why do you fear your own sons? Send for Anu to be brought down to you. Have Ea fetched into your presence. He sent for Anu to be brought down to him. Ea was fetched into his presence. Anu, king of the sky, was present. Ea, king of the Apsu, attended. The great Anunnaki were present. Ellil got up, and the case was put. Ellil made his voice heard, and spoke to the great gods. Is it against me that they have risen? Shall I do battle? What did I see with my own eyes? A rabble was running around my door. Anu made his voice heard and spoke to the warrior Ellil. Let Nusku go out and find out the word of the Igigi, who have surrounded your door. Ellil made his voice heard and told Nusku to find out who was in charge of the attack. And the gods exclaimed, "Every single one of us gods declared war. We have put a stop to the digging. The load is excessive. It is killing us. Our work is too hard. The trouble too much." So every single one of us gods has agreed to complain to Enlil. Nusku took his weapons and went and returned to Enlil. He told him of the gods' complaint. Enlil listened to that speech. His tears flowed. Enlil spoke guardedly, addressed the warrior Anu. "Noble one, take a decree with you to the sky. Show your strength. While the Anunnaki are sitting before you, call up one god, and let them cast him before destruction." Anu made his voice heard, and spoke to the gods, his brothers. "What are we complaining of? Their work was indeed too hard, their trouble too much. Every day the earth resounded. The warning signal was loud enough. We kept hearing the noise." Ea made his voice heard, and spoke to the gods, his brothers. "Why are we blaming them? Their work was too hard, their trouble too much. Every day the earth resounded. The warning signal was loud enough, and we kept hearing the noise." But let Ellil, the womb goddess, is present. Let her create primeval man, so that he may bear the yoke. Let man bear the load of the gods. Belet Ellil was also known by other names, such as Nintu and Mami. They called up the goddess, asked the midwife of the gods, wise Mami, "You are the womb goddess, creator of mankind. Create primeval man, that he may bear the yoke. Let him bear the yoke, the work of Enlil. Let man bear the load of the gods." Nintu made her voice heard and spoke to the great gods. "It is not proper for me to make him. The work is Ea's. He makes everything pure. If he gives me clay, then I will do it." Ea made his voice heard and spoke to the great gods. "On the 1st, 7th, and 15th of the month, I shall make a purification by washing. Then one god should be slaughtered, and the gods can be purified by immersion. Nintu shall mix clay with his flesh and his blood. Then a god and a man will mix together in clay. Let us hear the drumbeat forever after. Let a ghost come into existence from the god's flesh. Let her proclaim it as his living sign, and let the ghost exist so as not to forget the slain god." They answered yes in the assembly, the great Anunnaki who assigned the fates. On the 1st, 7th, and 15th of the month, he made a purification by washing. Ilawela, who had intelligence, they slaughtered in their assembly. Nintu mixed clay with his flesh and blood. They heard the drumbeat forever after. A ghost came into existence from the god's flesh, and she, Nintu, proclaimed it as his living sign. The ghost existed so as not to forget the slain god. After she had mixed that clay, she called up the Anunnaki, the great gods, the Igigi, the great gods, spat spittle upon the clay. Mami made her voice heard and spoke to the great gods. "I have carried out the work perfectly, the work that you ordered of me. You have slaughtered a god together with his intelligence. I have relieved you of your hard work. I have imposed your load upon man. You have bestowed noise upon mankind. I have undone the fetter and granted freedom." They listened to the speech of hers, and were freed from anxiety, and kissed her feet. "We used to call you Mami, but now your name shall be Mistress of all gods." Far-sighted Ea and wise Mami went into the room of fate. The womb goddesses were assembled. He trod the clay in her presence. She kept reciting an incantation, for Ea, staying in her presence, made her recite it. When she had finished her incantation, she pinched off 14 pieces of clay, and set 7 pieces to the right, 7 on the left. Between them she put down a mud brick. She made use of a reed, opened it to cut the umbilical cord. Called up the wise and knowledgeable womb goddesses, 7 and 7. 7 created males, 7 created females, for the womb goddess is creator of fate. Mami made these rules for people. In the house of a woman who is giving birth, the mud brick shall be put down for 7 days. Belet Ellil, wise Mami, shall be honored. The midwife shall rejoice in the house of the woman who gives birth. and when the woman gives birth to the baby, the mother of the baby shall sever herself. The womb goddesses were assembled, and Nintu was present. They counted the months, called up the 10th month as the term of fates. When the 10th month came, she slipped in a staff and opened the womb. Her face was glad and joyful. She covered her head, performed midwifery, put on her belt, and said a blessing. She made a drawing on the floor and put down a mud brick. I created, my hands made. The midwife shall rejoice in the house of the Kadishtu priestess. When the bed is laid out in their house, a wife and her husband shall choose each other. Ishtar shall rejoice in the husband-wife relationship in the father-in-law's house. Celebration shall last for 9 days. And the country became too wide, the people too numerous. The country was as noisy as a bellowing bull. The god grew restless at their racket. Ellil had to listen to their noise. He addressed the great gods. The noise of mankind has become too much. I am losing sleep over their racket. Give the order that a Shurupu disease shall break out. Now there was one Atrahasis whose ear was open to his god Ea. He would speak with his god, and his god would speak with him. Atrahasis made his voice heard, and spoke to his lord. How long will the gods make us suffer? Will they make us suffer illness forever? Ea made his voice heard, and spoke to his servant. Call the elders, the senior men. Start an uprising in your own house. Let heralds proclaim. Let them make a loud noise in the land. Do not revere your gods. Do not pray to your goddesses. But search out the door of Namtara. Bring a baked loaf into his presence. May the flour offering reach him. May he be shamed by the presence, and wipe away his hand. Atrahasis took the order, gathered the elders to his door. Atrahasis made his voice heard, and told the elders of Ea's plan. The elders listened to his speech. They built a temple for Namtara in the city. Heralds proclaimed. They made a loud noise in the land. They did not revere their god, did not pray to their goddess, but searched out the door of Namtara, and brought a baked loaf into his presence. The flour offering reached him, and he was shamed by the presence, and wiped away his hand. The Shurupu disease left them. The gods went back to their regular offerings. Again the country became too wide, the people too numerous. The country was as noisy as a bellowing bull. The god grew restless at their clamor. Enlil had to listen to their noise. He addressed the great gods. The noise of mankind has become too much. I am losing sleep over their racket. Cut off food supplies to the people. Let the vegetation be too scant for their hunger. Let Adad wipe away his rain. Below let no flood water flow from the springs. Let wind go. Let it strip the ground bare. Let winds gather but not drop rain. Let the field yield a diminished harvest. Let Nasaba stop up her bosom. No happiness shall come to them. Humans built a temple for Adad in the city, ordered heralds to proclaim, and make a loud noise in the land. They did not revere their gods, did not pray to their goddesses, but searched out the door of Adad, brought a baked loaf into his presence. The flour offering reached him. He was shamed by the presence and wiped away his hand. He made mist form in the morning, and in the night he stole out and made dewdrop. Delivered the field of its produce ninefold like a thief. The drought left them. The gods went back to their regular offerings. Not 3 epochs had passed. The country became too wide, the people too numerous. The country was as noisy as a bellowing bull. The gods grew restless at their noise. Ellil organized his assembly again, addressed the gods his sons. The noise of mankind has become too much. Sleep cannot overtake me because of their racket. Command that Anu and Adad keep the air above earth locked. Sin and Nergal keep the middle earth locked. As for the bolt that bars the sea, Ea with his Lamu creatures shall keep it locked. He ordered, and Anu and Adad kept the air above the earth locked. Sin and Nergal kept middle earth locked. Then the very wise man Atrahasis wept daily. He would carry the Mashakuk offering along the riverside pasture, although the irrigation water was silent. Halfway through the night he offered a sacrifice. As sleep began to overtake him, he addressed the irrigation water. May the irrigation water take it, may the river carry it. May the gift be placed in front of Ea, my lord. May Ea see it and think of me, so I may dream in the night. And when he had sent the message by water, he sat facing the river and wept. The man wept facing the river. His plea went down to the Apsu. Then Ea heard his voice. Above, rain did not fill the canals. Below, flood water did not flow from the springs. Earth's womb did not give birth. No vegetation sprouted. The dark pasture land was bleached. The broad countryside filled up with alkali. In the first year, they ate old grain. In the second year, they depleted the storehouse. When the third year came, their looks were changed by starvation. Their faces covered with scabs like malt. Their faces looked sallow. They went out in public hunched. Their well-set shoulders slouched. Their upstanding bearing bowed. They took a message from Atrahasis to the gods. When the 5th year arrived, a daughter would eye her mother coming in. A mother would not even open her door to her daughter. A daughter would watch the scales at the sale of her mother. A mother would watch the scales at the sale of her daughter. When the 6th year arrived, they served up a daughter for a meal, served up a son for food. The thoughtful man Atrahasis kept his ear open to his master Ea. He would speak with his god, and his god Ea would speak with him. He left the door of his god, put his bed right beside the river, for even the canals were quite silent. They were furious with each other, Ea and Ellil. We, the great Anuna, all of us, agreed together on a plan. Anu and Adad were to guard above. I was to guard the earth below. Where you went, you were to undo the chain and set us free. You were to release produce for the people. You were to exercise control by holding the balance. And Enlil said, You opposed your loads on man. You bestowed noise on mankind. You slaughtered a god together with his intelligence. You must create a flood. It is indeed your power that shall be used against your people. You agreed to the wrong plan. Have it reversed. Let us make far-sighted Ea swear an oath. Ea made his voice heard and spoke to his brother gods. Why should you make me swear an oath? Why should I use my power against my people? The flood that you mentioned to me, what is it? I don't even know. Could I give birth to a flood? That is Ellil's kind of work. Let him choose. The gods gave an explicit command, and Ellil performed a bad deed to the people. Atrahasis made his voice heard and spoke to his master. Indicate to me the meaning of the dream. Let me find out its portent. Ea made his voice heard and spoke to his servant. You say, I should find out in bed? Make sure you attend the message, I shall tell you. Wall, listen constantly to me. Reed Hut, make sure you attend all my words. Dismantle the house and build a boat. Reject possessions and save living things. The boat that you build, roof it like the Apsu, so that the sun cannot see inside it. Make upper decks and lower decks. The tackle must be very strong, the bitumen strong, to give strength. I shall make rain fall on you here, a wealth of birds, a hamper of fish. He opened the sand clock and filled it. He told him the sand needed for the flood was 7 nights' worth. Atrahasis received the message. He gathered the elders at his door. Atrahasis made his voice heard and spoke to the elders. My God is out of favor with your God. Ea and Enlil have become angry with each other. They have driven me out of my house. Since I always stand in awe of Ea, he told me of this matter. I can no longer stay in. I cannot set my foot on Enlil's territory again. I must go down to the Apsu and stay with my God. This is what he told me. The carpenter brought his axe. The reed worker brought his stone. A child brought bitumen. The poor fetched what was needed. He loaded up animals from all over onto the boat. He invited his people to a feast. He put his family on board. They were eating, they were drinking. He went in and out. He could not stay still or rest on his haunches. His heart was breaking, and he was vomiting bile. The face of the weather changed. Adad bellowed from the clouds. When he, Atrahasis, heard his noise, bitumen was brought, and he sealed his door. While he was closing up his door, Adad kept bellowing from the clouds. The winds were raging even as he went up, and cut through the rope he released the boat. No one could see anyone else. They could not be recognized in the catastrophe. The flood roared like a bull, like a wild ass screaming. The winds howled. The darkness was total. There was no sun. As for Nintu, the great mistress, her lips became encrusted with rime. The great gods, the Anuna, stayed parched and famished. The great goddess watched and wept. Midwife of the gods, wise Mammy said, "Let daylight, let it return." However could I, in the assembly of the gods, have ordered such destruction with them? Ellil was strong enough to give a wicked order. I heard their cry leveled at me, against myself, against my person. Beyond my control, my offspring have become like white sheep. As for me, how am I to live in a house of bereavement? My noise has turned to silence. Could I go away up to the sky and live in a cloister? What was Anu's intention as decision-maker? It was his command that the gods, his sons, obeyed. He who did not deliberate but sent the flood. He who gathered the people to catastrophe. Nintu was wailing. Would a true father have given birth to a rolling sea so that they could clog the river like dragonflies? They washed up like a raft overturned. They washed up like a raft overturned in open country. I have seen and wept over them. Shall I ever finish weeping for them? She wept. She gave vent to her feelings. Nintu wept and fueled her passions. The gods wept with her for the country. She was sated with grief. She longed for beer in vain. Where she sat weeping, there the great gods sat too, but like sheep could only fill their windpipes with bleeding. Thirsty as they were, their lips discharged only the rime of famine. For 7 days and 7 nights, the torrent, storm, and flood came on. When the flood was over, Atrahasis provided food as an offering. The gods smelt the fragrance, and gathered like flies over the offering. When they had eaten the offering, Nintu got up and blamed them all. Whatever came over Anu who makes these decisions? Did Ellil dare to come for the smoke offering? Those two who did not deliberate, but sent the flood, gathered the people to catastrophe. You agreed the destruction. Now their bright faces are dark forever. Then she went up to the big flies, which Anu had made, and declared before the gods, "His grief is mine, my destiny goes with his. He must deliver me from evil and appease me." The warrior Ellil spotted the boat, and he was furious with the Igigi. We, the great Anuna, all of us, agreed together on an oath. No form of life should have escaped. How did any man survive the catastrophe? Anu made his voice heard and spoke to the warrior Ellil. Who but Ea would do this? He made sure that the reed hut disclosed the order. Ea made his voice heard and spoke to the great gods. I did it, in defiance of you. I made sure life was preserved. Exact your punishment from the sinner, and whoever contradicts your order. I have given vent to my feelings. Ellil made his voice heard and spoke to far-sighted Ea. Come, summon Nintu, the womb goddess. Confer with each other in the assembly. Ea made his voice heard and spoke to the womb goddess Nintu. You are the womb goddess who decrees destinies. Among the people, the woman who gives birth, yet does not give birth successfully, let there be a Pashitu demon among the people, to snatch the baby from its mother's lap. Establish devoted temple women. They shall be taboo and thus control childbirth. How we sent the flood, but a man survived the catastrophe. You are the counselor of the gods. On your orders I created conflict. Let the Igigi listen to this song in order to praise you, and let them record your greatness. I shall sing of the flood to all people. Listen.